Thank you, Flo. Let's talk about the Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton. So we assumed that driver Lewis Hamilton wants to gain some useful insights and knowledge about his typical performances in Formula One over the years. And we will use data from various CSV files. For the pre-processing, we started by filtering the data for Lewis Hamilton using driver ID 1. And then we measured the percentage of missing values for each variable. We ignored the variables that had over a 90% missing value percentage. And then we only showed 100,000 rows for the file lap times because it had about 600,000 rows and it would crash the computer. And then we removed outliers using the Z-score because he wants to know what his typical performance is. And so we thought it would be best to remove the outliers. And then afterwards, we used a file called status.csv, which shows the status of each of the races. And then we only took the races that were completed. We didn't take the races where there was an accident or a collision. And then we used these ideas for the upcoming analysis. To begin with the overall performance, he had completed 322 races without technical issues and 3,295 valid laps. His fastest race average lap time was at the Styrian Grand Prix at 1.13 minutes. And his slowest was the Korean GP at 3.27 minutes. This is an example of taking the initial raw data and then giving it processing in order to get information and getting the average. Okay, to begin with the circuit insights, first to evaluate the best circuit, we looked at the circuits where he had the most wins, which was the British GP. As we can see, he had 9 wins and then a total of 15 podium finishes or top 3 finishes. So he has an excellent performance at this circuit. Another one of his best circuits, we evaluated using another method, which was to compare his lap times compared to the average field lap time performance of the other competitors. And so we can see here from this graph, for the best circuit, Portugal GP, we can see that all of the x-axis values are negative, which means that for every single race, when compared to the average of the field of the other competitors, he was faster than them. And we can see the proportion at the top is infinite, because we calculated the proportion of races he was faster compared to the races where he was slower than his competitors, and he was faster every time, so it's an infinite proportion. And then using a similar methodology, Syrian GP was also excellent. And for both of them, we can see the position on the y-axis. He never finished below second. He struggled in the Las Vegas GP and the Singapore GP and Austrian GP with his position and when compared to the field average. For the yearly performance trends, for the best year in terms of lap times was 2007 and then 2020. For best, we looked at the median line. And then in terms of consistent, both of these were also the most consistent when we looked at the interquartile range of the box plot. And then the least consistent year was 2010. Also looking at continuing on 2020, it also had one of his best average positions per year, as can be seen here. For 2020, we also constructed a violent plot, and we saw that in terms of his points, he had the best median and most consistent year, along with 2014. So in terms of best median, it's the line right here in the middle, or not in the middle, it's the white line. And then in terms of most consistent, we looked at the bulge, which was for 2020. We can see that it's around 25 points. And for Formula One, and this is referenced in our notebook, a Grand Prix win or a race win is 25 points. So this basically shows that he was winning most of his races. Some of the other examples have more than one bulge showing less consistency or a lower median line. So overall, this was his best year. When we look at the recent trend over the last 5 years in the data set, there's a gradual decline in average finishing position and median points.
Yeah, and 2023, he finished 5th, but he started 5th, but ended 3rd in 2023. Then 2024, he started 7th and ended 7th position. While 2022, he started by 3rd position and finished 5th position.
Moving on to the track conditions and geography, when we look at the latitude, he has a slight trend of showing better performance at higher latitudes. However, these aren't very reliable because, as you can see, the confidence gets gradually worse, or the shaded line gets thicker, which means as we go along the x-axis, there's less confidence. But it is worthy to note this trend. Longitude, slight trend towards better results at lower longitudes. And for altitude, it's a much weaker correlation, but it's slightly better performance at higher altitudes. For the climate impact, we can see that he performs worse in hotter conditions, such as Middle Eastern countries. And this is looking at the average position. And so for Saudi Arabia and Qatar, we can see that his average position is higher. This can give him an actionable goal to make sure to practice in these hotter climates. And then in Portugal, Russia, and Canada, he performs better. For the starting position or the grid insight, Hamilton generally, so the starting position in a grid basically means how close to the front of the grid he is when he starts the race. So there's a trend that when he's closer to the front of the race, he often gets more points, and this is shown by the trend. And thankfully, he started a lot in the first 5 positions of the grid, so he's already doing well there, but he should aim to continue starting at the front of the grid. For constructors, he has had historically 2 constructors, Mercedes and McLaren. Mercedes has more points per race and more points total, and so he has performed better in Mercedes than in McLaren. We also looked at an analysis that was not very actionable, but we thought we'd mention it. There was no significant correlation between the number of laps and Hamilton's final position, so he does not need to worry about that. And then we did a machine learning insight. So we looked at his previous positions, or his previous points per race over the last few years, and then we used it to predict 2025 points, 2026, and 2027. So the next few years. And we simulated 3 scenarios. A scenario where it was neutral, where it just takes the previous years and predicts based on these previous years. A pessimistic scenario where we subtracted 2 points from the prediction, and an optimistic scenario where we added 2 points to the prediction, just to give us a more comprehensive analysis. And based on all of them, it's expected to rise for 2025 and then gradually decrease. Okay, so let's give him some strategic recommendations for Hamilton and include some more knowledge added to the knowledge that I have already given. So continue optimizing qualifying performance. So start at the front least to better results, as you have seen by his previous results. And so he should aim to start closer to the front of the grid. So this is actionable insight or knowledge that he can use. Target improvement in specific circuits such as Las Vegas, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, especially Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are the hotter climates. And then leverage high-performance circuits where he already performs well, ensure he continues performing well, such as Portugal, Russia, and Canada. And then make sure to consider the geography, the latitude, longitudes, and altitude, even though the trends are not as strong. And consider the car and constructor fit, because it really affected his results, as we can see, as we have shown before. And make sure to improve over the next few years so he does not follow the machine learning trend of going down over the years. Now I'll hand it on to my